So good evening to all to the 16th session of Rise Up. And today we have a presentation on feminism through the eyes of a student by Meenakshi A. She is studying in 10th standard at Green Valley Public School, Kothamangalam. So let's start our presentation. Over to you, Meenakshi.
Thank you, Clemmy. So before I start my presentation, I have to say that I identify myself as a feminist. So even though the presentation is mostly based on facts, you might see a slight influence of my own opinions, especially towards the latter part of the presentation. So I'd like you guys to note down the points that you may disagree with or feel that they are not quite right. You may express your views on the same point. So maybe ask me some questions after my presentation is over, if we have some time left, that is. So without further ado, let's just move on to the presentation. So today we'll be covering the emergence of feminism, its evolution over the years, the most common misconceptions about feminism and feminists in general, and the relevance that feminism holds today. So I'll start with something that's familiar to us. Almost all of us have heard the term feminism in the last couple of years, especially after the emergence of the MeToo movement. But despite popular beliefs that the term MeToo was first surfaced in 2017, the MeToo phrase was first coined in 2006 by Tarana Burke, an advocate for women in New York. So Burke, she wanted a way to empower women by who had endured sexual violence by letting them know that they weren't alone and that other women had gone through the same experiences they did. And then in 2017, actress Alyssa Milano reintroduced the phrase as a way to encourage women and men to share their stories as part of an anti-sexual harassment movement. And the results of the revived movement were just unbelievable, with people from many parts of the world sharing their stories and sharing their stories about sexual assault and harassment on many different social media platforms, accompanied by the hashtag MeToo. So in the wake of these disclosures, some of the most important people in entertainment, sports, and politics were exposed for sexually harassing or assaulting others. Milano's decision to reintroduce the phrase was prompted by a New York Times article in which Harvey Weinstein, a former American film producer, was accused of sexually harassing others. At that time, Milano was unaware of the origin of the word, and she just began encouraging survivors to use the hashtag MeToo on social media to create awareness for the issue and build a sense of community and support among survivors. So for people who worked with survivors of sexual assault and harassment on a daily basis, the response was completely beyond what they could have a handle on. And finally, the issue they had been working towards for the last couple of years was gaining some balance, and it was getting attention from all over the world. Now, the local campaign, which was headed by Burke years before, had expanded to reach a community of survivors from all walks of life. So even though the movement was no longer limited to women, with people from all genders sharing their stories, the MeToo movement is still recognized as a feminist movement, mainly due to two reasons. One, it was brought into effect by Burke for empowering women. And two, even though men too were sharing their stories of sexual harassment, the movement was dominated by women sharing and bonding over their common encounters of sexual assault. So, the MeToo movement is one of the latest struggles related to feminism. How did it all start then? Throughout the years, many different types of feminism have emerged, and instead of describing them in isolation with each other, feminism has been divided into waves to show that it's continuous. The wave metaphor is the most common explanation for feminist movements, though it's not without its own flaws. It can oversimplify a complicated history of values, ideas, and people that are often in conflict with each other. With this simplification, we might think that feminism is a straightforward and a continuous arc, whereas the reality is much, much messier. There are many sub-movements building on and fighting with each other within feminism. That being said, the wave metaphor is indeed a useful starting point. It doesn't tell us the whole story, but it kind of helps outline it. So, feminism is classified into 4 waves. They are the first, the second, the third, and the fourth waves. The first wave. The first wave of feminism, which emerged in the late 19th century, was not the first appearance of feminist ideas, but it was the first real political movement for feminism in the Western world. In 1792, Mary Wollstonecraft published The Revolutionary Vindication of the Rights of Women. And in 1848, 200 women met in a church and came up with 12 resolutions asking for specific rights, such as the right to vote. Reproductive rights also became an important issue for early feminists. After years of feminism, the Congress finally passed the 19th Amendment in 1920 and gave women the right to vote. The first year of feminism had a fairly simple goal, which was have the society recognize that women are humans too and not property. So while the leaders of the first wave of feminism were abolitionists, which basically means people working against a particular system or notion deemed harmful to the society, the focus was mainly on white women's rights. In short, the first wavers were basically racists who sought to free themselves from the bindings of one type of inequality while promoting another one. Now, let's move on to the second wave of feminism. The second wave emerged in the 1960s and 1970s, and it built on the first wave of feminism and challenged what women's role in society should be. So, inspired by the civil rights movement and protests against the Vietnam War, activists focused on institutions that held women back. This meant taking a closer look at why women were oppressed. Traditional gender and family roles were questioned, and issues of rape, reproductive rights, domestic violence, and workplace were brought to the front of the movement, and there was widespread effort to reform the negative and inferior image of women in popular culture to a more positive and realistic one. There were major victories in this era, which included the Equal Pay Act of 1963, which guaranteed equal pay for both the genders, and many other Supreme Court cases. 3 main types of feminism emerged during this period, which are mainstream or liberal feminism, radical feminism, and cultural feminism. Mainstream feminism mainly focused on institutional reforms, which meant reducing gender discrimination by giving women access to male-dominated spaces and promoting equality. Radical feminism, on the other hand, wanted to reshape the society entirely, saying that the system was patriarchal, which means a system that was largely dominated by men, completely excluding women from it. And the radical feminists believed that only an overhaul, a renovation, would bring liberation. It resisted the belief that men and women were basically the same. And cultural feminism promoted a similar view and taught that there's a female essence that is distinct from that of men. The cultural feminists believed that men and women must be treated equally on all social, political, and cultural aspects, but they weren't the same. This was what the cultural and radical feminists believed. Now, the third wave of feminism. Thanks to the institutional victories of the second wave of feminism, women had more rights, freedom, and power going into the 1990s. They were able to think about other aspects of their identity by welcoming individuality and rebellion. This was an era of sorts of reclaiming. Many women now freely express their sexuality in how they spoke, dressed, and acted, which sometimes bewildered the second wave feminists, many of whom had resisted traditional femininity. Even though there were many ideas and movements that came up around this time, the one rule was that there were many rules. A woman should choose how she lived her life. The main aim of the third wavers was to question, reclaim, and redefine the words and media that have transmitted ideas about womanhood, gender, beauty, sexuality, femininity, and masculinity, among other things. The third wave of feminism was more conscious of race too. Kimberly Crenshaw, a gender and critical race scholar, coined the phrase intersectionality in 1989. The term refers to how different kinds of oppression, like those based on gender and race, intersect with each other, which basically meant that feminist movements must be inclusive of all women, no matter their skin color, religion, or any other forms of discrimination. So, while the mainstream first and second wave feminism largely ignored or neglected racial disparities within the gender, the third wave of feminism paid more attention. The phrase third wave of feminism was coined by Rebecca Walker, a Black bisexual woman, in 1992. And during this period, the internet was becoming more commonplace, and so it was even easier to hear perspectives and ideas from feminists all around the world. Feminism was expanding. The fourth wave of feminism. Some people still think that we are living in the third wave of feminism since there isn't much of a shift as there was between the first and the second waves, or the second and the third waves of feminism. But with the emergence of the MeToo movement and a reappearance of attacks on women's rights, many believe that we are now living in a new wave. Social media activism has pushed the movement firmly into the technological age. The fourth wave of feminism builds on the third wave's emphasis on inclusivity and asks questions on what empowerment, equality, and freedom really mean. Being critiques of white feminism, which ignored the unique struggles of women of color, the fourth wavers expose how non-white feminists have been and continue to be suppressed. Trans rights are now a big part of the conversation too. Feminism has often been known as an unwelcoming and hostile place for trans women and others who reject the gender binary. But many fourth wavers are now working to combat this exclusion. And as with every wave before the fourth wave, and with any wave that might come after it too, the fourth wave is indeed very complex. It includes many movements that complement and clash with each other. But this tension is unavoidable, and it brings a positive result overall, because even though some types of feminism have harmful impacts for the movement as a whole, a variety of voices makes feminism kind of more inclusive and successful. So the most common claims that anti-feminists pose to prove that modern feminism is unnecessary is that as long as men and women are equal before the law, feminism is something that promotes misandry, which is prejudice against men, and they believe that feminism, modern feminism, diverts the public from actual men's rights issues. These arguments mainly stem from media distortion of the movement and confusing feminism with pseudo-feminism. Now, this leads us to the next section of our presentation, which is my favorite part of the presentation, personally speaking, which is the most common misconceptions about feminism. The word feminist has been derived from the French word féministe, which in turn is based on the French word femme, which means woman. In English, Feminism refers to the advocacy of equal rights for women. The word feminism was used for the first time in 1890s, but it came into general use only in the 1960s. The word feminism refers to the consciousness that women are unjustly treated simply because they are women. Feminism is probably one of the most overused words in the past few years. The word, which simply means equality of women in the society or the advocacy of women's rights on the ground of the equality of the sexes, is now being predicted as the supremacy of women over men. This is why the word feminism is often misunderstood, and people who are actually pseudo-feminists take the cover of feminism to overpower men. These people whose sole aim is to demean or suppress the men in the society, they think that they are feminists and they think that they can do anything as long as they have the power to do so. This way of thinking and putting men down is called pseudo-feminism, or more commonly, fake feminism. To explain this term further, pseudo-feminists basically say that we had a lot of suffering in the past, so even if we support men, surpass men, we have the right to do that, whereas equality was and is the objective of feminism then and now. So I updated my Instagram story and my WhatsApp status a couple of weeks before as part of the research for this presentation, which basically read, "Do you support feminism? Why or why not?" But as expected, there were very few replies from my friends and family. I got like 5 or 6 responses, and most of them were one-word answers. So that wouldn't do. So I took to a public website online and posted the same question there to know the opinions of the general public. And I was happy to see that a lot of people had a right reflection of understanding on what feminism really is, but there were also many people who actually confused feminism with misandry. I'm actually unable to disclose the exact answers because it would be a violation of the privacy guidelines of the website. But I'll just share with you the most common misconceptions that I read by going through the responses. Misconception number 1. Feminism is about male bashing. No, it isn't. That would be misandry, with which feminism is often mistaken for. So by definition, feminism refers to the advocacy of women's rights on the ground of the equality of the sexes. All feminism believes is for women to be treated as equals, not above or below anybody, just equal. And despite popular belief, feminists don't set out to kill any men that they set their eyes on. Their agenda for equal rights has absolutely nothing to do with man-hating. They don't judge all men to be chauvinist and sexist just on the basis of their gender. What they disapprove of is patriarchy and the idea that man is superior to woman. And of course, they disapprove of anybody who promotes it in any form, irrespective of their gender. So if you see a feminist who hates men solely because they are men, then we have to understand that the person is not a feminist. He or she is just simply a man-hater who is using feminism as their hide or their cover to just simply hate on men. Misconception number 2. Only women can be feminists. Just like how you don't have to be an animal to support animal rights, you, of course, don't have to be a woman to support equal rights for women. Feminism is the idea that aims at providing equal opportunities to women, and supporting it has nothing to do with their gender. Men can be feminists too, and you'll be surprised to know that a lot of them already are. And anyone who supports equal rights for women is a feminist. So if you treat all people around you as equals on a personal level, and if you think that women are as capable as men, in all aspects. And if you disapprove of concepts like patriarchy and matriarchy, which put one gender above the other, then you are a feminist too. So, in short, there's nothing wrong with being a feminist. Instead, it's indeed something to be proud of, but often it's not possible because being a feminist myself, I often find it difficult to, introduce myself as a feminist in the outside world or even to my friends and family, because many of them have a negative perception of what feminism is by confusing it with pseudo feminism. They think that feminists are man haters, and many of them actually ask me when I introduce myself as a feminist that, so are you planning to not marry at all, or are you planning to stay single for the whole life, or some questions like that. So this reflects a right, and this doesn't reflect the right understanding of what feminism is, because they think that all feminists are man haters, or that all feminists just wear men's clothing or whatever. So it's often difficult to be proud of being a feminist, to be openly proud of being a feminist, but we are just reaching that. We are reaching, our goal. The society is becoming more acceptable of feminists all around the world. So hopefully we'll see a change in the perception of the society on what feminism actually is. The third misconception is that feminists love and support all women alike. That's just about as true as the first misconception. The fight for feminism is against anybody who supports or implements patriarchy in any form. It doesn't matter whether that person is a male or a female. And I'd say that women are equally responsible for letting the nation get consumed by patriarchy ever since we formed the society. Just like how every man is not a patriarch, not all women support equal rights either. There are some backward notions about how women have, are, and always will be inferior to men. This is precisely the mindset that feminism aims at eradicating. So it doesn't matter whether the person in question is a man or a woman. Real feminists dislike men who advocate for matriarchy as much as they hate the supporters of patriarchy. Misconception number 4. Feminism is detrimental to men. So I've seen a lot of men, up in the arms just at the mention of feminism because they feel endangered about its impact. So even though feminism is primarily about fighting for equal rights for women, I'd say that it benefits men equally. Feminism is an end to not just gender roles for women, but those for men too. It supports the idea of men not having to give in to the societal pressures of being the only fender, the breadwinner, and someone with superhuman strength, as much as it advocates that women be allowed to break out of stereotypes. So just like Emma Watson said in her He for She speech at the UN, I've seen men made fragile and insecure by a distorted sense of what constitutes male success. Men don't have the benefits of equality either. We don't often talk about men being imprisoned by gender stereotypes, but I can see that they are, and that when they are free, things will change for women as a natural consequence. If men don't have to be aggressive in order to be accepted, women won't feel compelled to be submissive. If men don't have to control, women won't have to be controlled. Both men and women should feel free to be sensitive. Both men and women should feel free to be strong. It is time that we all pursue gender on a spectrum instead of two sets of opposing ideals. If we stop defining each other by what we are not and start defining ourselves by who we are, we can all be free. It's about freedom. I want men to take up this mantle so that their daughters, sisters, and mothers can be free from prejudice, but also so that their sons have permission to be vulnerable and human too, and reclaim those parts of themselves they abandoned, and in doing so, be a truer and complete version of themselves. So, while fighting for equality for women, feminism gives men freedom too. So, it doesn't hurt them, instead, it helps them. Misconception number 5. Feminism is the fight for power and matriarchy. This is a common myth that the day feminism takes over the world, men would become oppressed. But in fact, it's not the power or supremacy that feminists want. They only want the equality. And actual feminism disapproves of matriarchy as much as it hates the patriarchal setup. Feminism is not a fight for power. It is just a fight to bring women up to the same pedestal as men. Feminism refers to fighting for equal rights and opportunities for women, exercising which shall be one's personal choice. There is no hidden matriarchal agenda that feminism is working towards, and it certainly doesn't take away one's rights as a man. Feminism understands the term equality in every sense of the word. So, misconception number 6. Feminists are a stuck-up, crazy, and a touchy bunch of people. So, there's this popular belief that feminists lack humor sense, so they can't be modest, caring, or cheerful like, which are the characters, which are the stereotypical characters associated with being a woman. And hysterical is the word that's often used to describe feminists. But not all of them lash out at every other remark made at them. And feminists are certainly not a violent bunch of people who take to social media at the drop of a hat and creating issues out of nothing. So it's time that we stop looking at feminists as those scary social activists who are out there to just destroy everything, especially men. And yes, you can have a polite discussion with feminists without them tearing you apart for nothing, despite the society believing the other way. Misconception number 7. Feminists want it easy. That feminists want everything in life to be served on a silver platter to them is a total myth. They understand the difference between equality and privilege, and they don't want to be raised up on a higher platform. Instead, they just want a chance to live in the world as freely as men. It is unfair how women, even in the most commercial fields like the glamour industry, are not paid as much as their male counterparts. So feminists are not demanding privileges for women. Instead, they want women to receive what they deserve. Misconception number 8. Male feminists are men against their own gender. So male feminists receive a lot of hate from other men for being traitors. They are all assumed to be gay and accused of misandry for pretty much no valid reason. No, you are neither going against the law of nature, nor betraying your own gender by supporting women's rights. Supporting gender equality for women doesn't make you any less of a man. Feminism is not a war between the two sexes. It is you standing up for what's right for humanity's sake. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be against one sex to be helping the other one. And male feminists are bringing down stereotypes against men too, as mentioned earlier. And so it would be unreasonable to say that they are against their own gender. Misconception number 9. Feminist women cannot be stereotypically feminine. So, due to the reason that feminists refuse to correspond to the societal pressures of being a woman, it is generally assumed that all feminists are against acts of traditional femininity. So it's assumed that all women dress up like men and they absolutely despise all women's clothing. But the truth is that feminism is not against femininity, but it's against women being told by the society on how to dress up or behave. And limiting them by gender roles is what the fight of feminism is all about. A male feminist just wants to be herself, whether the society considers it to be feminine enough or not. As long as it's by choice, feminists are totally fine with anybody being feminine. Misconception number 10. Feminists don't believe in marriages. So being a feminist myself and having busted the myth that feminist women hate men, we can go on to say that feminism doesn't reject the constitution of marriage. Whether someone believes in marriage or not is a personal choice, irrespective of their views on feminism. And feminists are definitely against the idea of unequal marriages, which happen to be extremely prevalent in India, which is probably why the assumption that all feminists hate marriages exists. And a feminist could be interested in getting married or starting a family of his or her own just as much as any other person out there. The only difference would be that they probably want their partners to be free of prejudices against or in favor of any particular gender. Misconception number 11. All feminist women are career-oriented. No. Feminism doesn't say that a woman who stays at home and raises a family is oppressed or regressive. It respects a woman who has chosen to be a homemaker as much as it embraces a woman who steps out and makes a mark in the big bad corporate world. It is a section of pseudo-feminists who equates modernity and progressive thinking to making careers. Real feminists respect every woman's choice of who she wants to be, whether she wears a hijab or a saffron shawl. The freedom of choice is what feminism stands in support for, no matter whether that leads a woman to the kitchen or the office. Feminism advocates for equal rights that every woman deserves, and what she chooses is completely left up to her since it's her personal choice. Having said that, feminists are equally accepting of men who choose to stay at home too. Because if women get a choice to choose between working or staying at home, so shall men. Now, we'll be moving on to the unending argument that has been haunting feminism for the last couple of years, which is feminism still a necessity in our new world of freedom and liberation for women? I'd like to argue that it absolutely is, because sadly, the position of women in the society, the world, the workplace, the government, the house are in constant need of redefinition. Here are some reasons why. 1. Gender-based violence. Deeply rooted in misogyny, which is prejudice against women, there are alarmingly high rates of gender-based violence, which deepen the need for feminism to remain in full force. And while men too fall victim to sexual harassment, women are certainly affected at higher rates. And crime statistics expose that 1 in 3 women have experienced physical and/or sexual violence, while 1 in 2 women have experienced sexual harassment. It also shows that 95% of the trafficked victims are women. And it has been argued that the most harmful forms of abuse, sexual violence especially, affect mostly women. So let's just put the statistics away for a moment and look back into the year that just passed us by. There have been quite a few homicide cases related to dowry and domestic violence that caught the public's attention in Kerala in 2021, in which all the victims were women. So while every case of violence are found in different circumstances, perhaps the issue underpinning gender-based violence is the idea that women are placed in an inferior position to that of men. Whether this is rooted in physical strength or intellectual superiority, the centuries past show that women are placed below men in social hierarchy, and so the verbal, physical, and emotional abuse of women is somehow justifiable. This power imbalance between men and women have devastating consequences and affirms that feminism is timelessly important even in the 21st century. The gender pay gap is another reason why feminism is still relevant today. It has deepened during the COVID-19 pandemic with women being left behind on pay raises and bonuses. In India, only 65% of women received a pay rise or bonus compared to 70% of men during the pandemic. Despite the study finding that women and men are just as likely to take on new responsibilities or a new role due to COVID-19 related impacts on their organization. Education, too, remains a controversial issue for many cultures, with countless young girls being denied their fundamental rights to education. And of all the illiterate people in the world, 2/3 are women. When girls are not educated on the same level as boys, it has a huge effect on their future and the kinds of opportunities that they'll get. The story of Malala Yousafzai from Pakistan speaks of the desperation of many young girls to receive education and seek rewarding, fulfilling professions. Next is the issue of child marriage. So, while both boys and girls are affected by child marriage, girls disproportionately fall victim to it. In South Asia, 45% of women aged 20 to 24 years are reported being married before the age of 18, which included 17% of girls getting married before the age of 15. And then there's the ongoing controversy in our country about raising the marriage age of women from 18 to 21, which, if implemented, will be at par with that of men. But that issue could be up for discussion another day, since it's something that we need to look closely at. We can't just take a quick decision on it, because we have to view the issue from both points of view. So these examples, along with many more like gender tax, employment inequality, and lack of bodily autonomy, etc., show that there is serious denial of rights for women in many parts of the world. The perception that women are inferior to men must be broken. There remain too many gender-based divisions in our society and beyond. The feminist movement confers hope to the lives of women across the world to see a change. So, while we have overcome our political rights in the last century, the position of women remains one of neglect culturally and socially. But this isn't to say that our society should necessarily transform into a utopian vision in which the glass ceiling is shattered, or that women must surpass men in social hierarchy. Instead, it wants society to view everyone as equal, regardless of their gender, race, or background. So, it is therefore undeniable that the feminist movement remains even more important in the 21st century than it ever has before, to continue the fight for equality across the world. Thank you.
So yes, Meenakshi, it was very wonderful session. You were rocking. So those who have any questions, you can ask or you can give feedbacks.
Meenakshi, this was one of the best ever presentations I have heard in Rise Up in general, and from a student on such a serious topic like feminism. So I highly appreciate, and you had very good clarity. Hats off to you.
Thank you, sir. And I received a question from Admiga, which asked, is there any specific name for male feminists? And no, they're just called feminists in general. Women and men, they are generally just called feminists.
Meenakshi, I would like to congratulate you because it was really, really good. It's really appreciable. And the way, the confidence which you had in your presentation, like throughout 45 minutes, plus, like you knew the concept very well. And, it was so confident that like we couldn't even find any fault in it. It was that so good. And yeah, it is really appreciable. And I guess you have a long way to go in Rise Up itself for in GrainEd. Like maybe after years, you can be the mentor here itself. It was really good.
Thank you, Sri Lakshmi. It really means a lot because I was like really nervous before the presentation, and I didn't know what I would do if something happened between the presentations. So it really means a lot. Thank you.
No words to say. I will say after the presentation, after when we talk, because for me it was very good because she told me like she is practicing for many days, many times a day. So I know how much effort she took to bring on the presentation. So no words to say. That's why I was not responding. Yeah, you didn't let.
So Meenakshi, I have two questions. One is how much time it took for you to prepare? And is it the company of Avinash and Nikhil in school which made you a feminist?
I was actually a feminist before I made friends with them because I actually, really started being friends with them in like the last couple of months. I didn't really know them before that. And of course, I'll do that just after this. So, and also, I was a feminist before that because, I want equal rights for everyone, irrespective of their gender. So, and what was the other question? I actually forgot it.
How much time it took for you to prepare for this one?
Actually, the graphics and everything is done by my sister, so I didn't have to worry about that part. I just prepared, the article, which was the outline for the presentation, and I just practiced many times. I think I took like 2 weeks to just practice it, and I had work from school too, so it was like a kind of a hectic schedule. So I couldn't manage to practice more than like 4 or 5 times. And about the issue of burqa or hijab that's now in India, I kind of feel that even though it's like it's a right as the religion as a whole to practice and preach their own religion, for the girls to practice and preach their own religion, I kind of think that burqa, hijab, I don't think it's really a problem, but burqa sometimes violates the uniform dress code policy that is mandatory for the educational institutions in the country. So but I can't really say something about whether one part of the controversy is right or not. But when we look from both sides of the issue, I'd say that yes, the girls are right about being allowed to our rights about protesting against not being allowed to wear hijab or burqa, but at the same time we have to look at the other side of the issue too, which is all the educational institutions must have a uniform dress code in school, in schools or colleges in general. And also there are many other Hindu women and girls also protesting that if hijab must be allowed, then saffron shawls and other religious accessories must be allowed too. So we have to wait and see what the court procedures show us before we have to look from both sides of the issue, to be honest. And I can't really say which side is right or wrong. So